My name is Margaret, and I am 72 years old. I have carried a heavy secret in my heart for most of my life. Today, I feel it is time to share it, not because it's easy, but because holding it in has become unbearable. This is a story of love, betrayal, regret, and an attempt at forgiveness. It is my story, and I will tell it as honestly as I can, even if my voice trembles and my heart aches with every word. I met my husband John in the spring of 1968. We were both so young back then. I was 19 and he was 21, handsome in his army uniform with a smile that could warm the coldest night. We fell in love fast. By autumn that year, we married. I remember walking down the aisle in the old chapel, sunlight filtering through stained glass and dancing across John's tear-filled eyes as he saw me in my white dress. It felt like a scene from a movie, perfect and full of promise. Our early days were bliss. In our little house on a quiet street, John left me love notes tucked in drawers, between book pages, under my pillow. Each time I found one, I'd laugh, and my heart would overflow with love. We slow danced in the living room to our favorite songs on the radio, his arms wrapped around me as if he'd never let go. Those memories still make me smile through tears, even now. But life began to change. The Vietnam War was raging, and John felt duty-bound to serve. I was proud of his courage, but terrified. The night he told me he'd enlisted, my hands trembled as I sewed a missing button on his shirt. I pricked my finger, and a drop of blood stained the fabric. I forced a smile and told him I was proud, but inside my heart was already breaking. When John shipped out, I stood on the train platform, waving goodbye and trying not to cry. He pressed his forehead to mine and whispered, "I'll come back to you, I promise." I remember the feel of his duffel brushing my leg, the smell of his cologne mixed with the crisp autumn air. I clung to that last hug as the train carried him away, not knowing more than just miles would come between us. In the weeks and months that followed, I lived for the sound of the mailman's footsteps bringing me letters from John. And I flinched whenever a late-night phone call came, terrified it would be bad news from overseas. At night, I slept in one of his old t-shirts just to breathe in his scent and feel like he wasn't so far away. Sometimes I cried quietly into the pillow, missing him more than I could put into words. I tried to be the brave soldier's wife. By day, I worked at the library and volunteered packing care packages for troops. By night, I wrote him letters by the soft glow of the lamp, pouring all my love into every page. I always ended with, "Come back safe, I need you, I love you," and I meant every word. His replies were infrequent. War leaves little time for writing. But when they came, my heart leapt. I'd recognize his handwriting at a glance and rush to read his letters. He wrote about the heat, the jungles, the uncertainty of each day. Yet he always shared his hopes for our future, the family we wanted, the little house with a picket fence we dreamt of. Once he even tucked a pressed wildflower into a letter, saying it reminded him of me, delicate and beautiful even in the middle of chaos. I wept after reading that, clutching the flower and praying to God to bring him home to me. I pictured him in some faraway jungle, tucking that flower into the envelope amidst gunfire and danger, and my heart ached with love and fear. Months turned into a year. I spent my 21st birthday alone with a cupcake and a single candle, making one wish: for John's safety. I remember watching that tiny flame flicker in the silence, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The world around me was changing with protests and turmoil. I was torn between pride in my husband and fear of losing him. Loneliness crept in like a shadow, especially in the quiet moments before dawn when I'd reach across the bed for him and find it empty. His letters came less often, and his words grew more weary. I tried to stay strong, but I was struggling too. Around that time, I became friends with a man named Peter at the volunteer center. He was a few years older than me, kind-eyed and soft-spoken. A medical condition had kept him from the draft, and his wife had left him the year before. He understood loneliness. We talked often, at first about simple things, then about our fears and hopes. Peter was a comforting presence, a gentle voice on nights when I felt most alone. I told myself our friendship was innocent. And for a while, it was. On difficult evenings when I missed John terribly, I'd call Peter. We would talk for hours. I even confessed feelings I never dared write to John. How angry I was at being left behind. How afraid I was of ending up alone. Peter listened with patience and compassion. His empathy felt like a warm blanket on a cold night. I thought I was simply finding solace, a harmless refuge for my aching heart. One spring evening in 1970, Peter came by to drop off supplies for the care packages. Rain was pouring down and he was soaked, so I invited him in. We sat by the fireplace, sipping hot tea and listening to the rain hammer the roof. In the flickering firelight, an unspoken tension grew between us. I was desperately lonely. He was kind and understanding. When he gently brushed a damp strand of hair from my face and whispered, "You shouldn't have to be so lonely," I closed my eyes and let him kiss me. In that single heartbreaking moment, I forgot the war, forgot my fears, and I betrayed my husband. It lasted only a moment, but that moment would haunt me for the rest of my life. Peter left when the rain eased, and as soon as the door closed behind him, guilt crashed down on me. I slid to the floor, my back against the door, and sobbed until my throat was raw. I felt like the worst person alive. I kept asking myself how I could do such a thing to the man who was risking his life for me. There was no answer, only remorse and shame. In the days that followed, I cut off all contact with Peter. I quit volunteering for a while and stopped taking his calls. I couldn't face him. I couldn't face myself. I decided I would carry this secret alone for the rest of my life. If John came home, I vowed to be the best wife imaginable to him, to somehow atone for what I had done, and to never let him suspect a thing. It was a burden I chose to bear in silence, as punishment for my weakness. Not long after that night, one of John's letters arrived. My hands shook as I opened it, feeling unworthy to read his words. In it, John wrote about his buddy Travis, who had been killed by an ambush. He described how in Travis's final moments, as he lay dying in the mud, he clutched a photograph of his fiancée and begged John to make sure she knows I love her. John said that experience shattered something in him. He admitted that the thought of me ever getting a folded flag instead of him coming home kept him awake at night. "I fight to survive for us, Maggie," he wrote. "The thought of you is what keeps me alive out here." I felt my heart constrict so tightly I could barely breathe. John was holding on to our love to survive hell on earth, and I had failed him at home. I collapsed onto the floor, pressing the letter to my heart, and cried harder than I ever had in my life. Between sobs, I whispered into the empty room, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," as if somehow he might hear me across the distance. From that day on, I steeled myself with new determination. I returned to volunteering, careful to avoid Peter, and focused only on the day John would come home. I prayed and promised that if I was given a second chance, I would devote every day to making him happy. In early 1971, John finally came home. I will never forget standing at the airport terminal, scanning the crowd until I saw him. He looked thinner, a little gaunt, with new lines etched on his face and a faraway look in his eyes, but he was alive. I ran to him, tears blurring my vision. When I felt his arms around me, I broke down sobbing onto his shoulder. He was home, warm and safe. I kept whispering, "Thank God you're here, thank God." I thought if I held him tight enough, I could squeeze all the pain of war out of him and fill him with love again. Settling back into everyday life took time. John had nightmares that jolted him awake at night. I would hold him until his trembling eased. Sometimes I'd catch him staring off, lost in memories of things he'd seen and lost. I tried to be his safe harbor, the gentle, loving wife he needed. We found small joys together again, a picnic by the lake, cooking breakfast and laughing when he burned the toast. For moments, it felt like it used to. Yet every time I looked into his loving eyes, I felt a stab of guilt. My secret lingered, an invisible wall between us. I thought about confessing countless times, but I justified my silence as protection for him. He'd endured so much. How could I heap more pain on him now? In truth, I was also afraid. Afraid of losing him. Afraid of seeing the love in his eyes turn to heartbreak. So I kept my betrayal buried and hoped my devotion would somehow cover it. A year passed. It was the summer of 1972. A warm, quiet evening. We had finished dinner and were washing the dishes together, talking about maybe taking a short trip, a belated honeymoon we never got to have. I remember I was smiling at the thought when John suddenly fell silent. He put down the dish he was drying and asked, "Maggie, is there something you want to tell me?" My heart kicked in my chest. I felt the blood drain from my face. Somehow, I managed to reply, barely above a whisper, "What do you mean?" He looked at me with eyes full of hurt. "I ran into Peter today," he said quietly. My stomach lurched. John went on, voice trembling. Peter had approached him at the grocery store and confessed to overstepping with me while John was in Vietnam. He said John deserved to know the truth. The room spun around me. I gripped the sink to steady myself. Tears blurred my vision. "It's true," I whispered, my voice cracking. In that moment, I admitted everything. As I spoke, his face went pale and his eyes filled with hurt and disbelief I'd never seen before. I told him I had made a horrible mistake, that I was so lonely and convinced I'd lost him, that I slipped, and that I had hated myself every day since. The silence that followed was like death. I could hear the faucet dripping and my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. John's face, it was as if I'd shot him. His shoulders sagged under an invisible weight. Finally, he spoke, voice broken. "I was fighting to come home to you, and you..." He couldn't finish. His tears fell freely, and my heart broke seeing him, this strong man I loved, brought to his knees emotionally by my actions. I reached out in desperation, but he recoiled from my touch. "John, I'm sorry," I cried. "I'm so sorry. It meant nothing. I only ever loved you. Please forgive me." Emotional. I was pleading, shaking, hardly able to breathe through the sobs. He wiped a hand across his eyes, then asked softly, "Did you love him?" "No, never. Not for one moment," I answered immediately. "I have only ever loved you." John closed his eyes for a long moment, tears streaming down his cheeks. Then he turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word. A moment later, I heard the front door open and then shut. He was gone. I stood there, chest heaving with sobs, feeling my world collapse. When I finally moved, I ran out onto the porch. I caught a glimpse of our car's tail lights at the end of the street before they vanished. He was gone, and I didn't know if he'd ever come back. That night was agony. I sat in the living room, all the lights off, waiting and praying that he would return. Every minute felt endless. I whispered desperate prayers into my hands, "Please come back, please," again and again. Just before dawn, the front door creaked open. John stepped inside, eyes red and face drawn. We stared at each other in the gray early light. I opened my mouth to speak, but he simply shook his head. In a voice so quiet I could barely hear, he said, "I need to sleep. We'll talk later." Then he walked past me into the bedroom and closed the door. In the days that followed, a heavy silence hung over us. John slept on the couch, leaving our bed cold and empty. He hardly spoke. I moved around our home as if in a bad dream, not knowing how to reach him, or if I even had the right to try. Our once warm, lively house felt cold and empty. Every room a reminder of the rift between us. I would hear him crying softly when he thought I wasn't listening. And each time it felt like a dagger to my heart. I had done that. I had caused the man I loved such pain. After a few weeks of tiptoeing around each other's hurt, I knew we had to confront it. One evening, I found him sitting on our porch, watching the sunset with a distant stare. Summoning every ounce of courage, I sat beside him. My voice shook as I said, "John, if you want me to leave, I will, but I hope you know that I love you, and I am so sorry. If there's any chance to fix this, no matter how long it takes, I'll do anything." Tears were flowing down my face. I was prepared for him to tell me it was over, that I should pack my bags. John didn't reply at first. He just kept gazing ahead, hands clasped, jaw tight. The silence was unbearable. Finally he spoke, each word heavy with raw emotion. "I saw so much death and pain over there," he said slowly. "All that kept me going was the idea of coming home to you. When I found out what happened, it broke something in me." He took a shaky breath. "I'm angry, Maggie. I'm hurt, but I still love you. I can't just stop loving you, even if I want to. I don't know how to get past this, but I don't want to lose you either." A sob of relief escaped my throat. He still loved me. Despite everything, he hadn't given up on us. Gently, I reached for his hand. This time, he let me take it. "If you can ever forgive me," I whispered, "I'll spend the rest of my life earning it. I will never hurt you again. No matter how long it takes, I'll be here, by your side, trying to make this right." John looked at me, tears in his eyes. The pain was there, but so was love. He gave a small nod. "We'll take it one day at a time," he murmured. It wasn't a grand declaration of forgiveness, but it was enough. It was hope. So we began the long road to healing. It was not easy. Some days were tense and fragile, and some nights were cold and quiet. There were times I saw a flicker of hurt in his eyes and knew he was remembering. All I could do was show him, with every action, that he was my world, that he truly always had been. One night, a few months later, we tried to watch a movie about a soldier returning from war. In the story, the soldier learned his wife had been unfaithful. Halfway through, John turned off the TV and walked outside without a word. I found him in the yard, shoulders shaking as he struggled not to cry. Wordlessly, I slipped my hand into his. After a moment, he squeezed it. In that squeeze was both his hurt and his willingness to try to forgive. I realized then that while he might never forget what I did, he was working toward forgiving me, little by little. He never spoke the words, "I forgive you," outright. But he showed it in countless small ways. In the way he would gently brush my hair back and kiss my forehead before bed, or how he would quietly reach for my hand when I seemed angry.